So guys, we're getting really close to final roster cuts, and the Giants just made a move that I definitely wasn't expecting right now. And what makes this even more interesting is that John Harbaugh is right in the middle of it, because the timing of this decision raises some pretty big questions about where this roster is heading, especially with the Dolphins joint practice coming up and several jobs still on the line. So let me explain what the Giants just did, why Harbaugh made this move now, and what could happen next before this roster gets down to 53. What's up, Big Blue? Welcome to the NFL Playbook, Giants. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Okay guys, let's just get right into it because this news dropped and honestly, I had to read it twice. The Giants have traded offensive lineman Daniel Faalele to the Jacksonville Jaguars. In return, New York is getting a 6th-round pick in the 2027 draft pending a physical. Now think about that for a second. Daniel Faalele signed with the Giants back in April as a free agent, and here we are, not even in the middle of preseason, and he's gone. I mean, honestly, that's fast. Real fast. We're talking about a guy who was brought in with expectations, at least some kind of role, and just a few months later, he's already wearing a different uniform before he even played one official snap for this team. And the reason this trade matters so much isn't just the player leaving, it's what it tells us about how John Harbaugh is running this roster. Look, in this league, guys get cut all the time. But getting cut is different than getting traded away for actual draft capital. When a team releases somebody, that usually means nobody else wanted him. But when another franchise is willing to give up a pick, even a late one, that tells you there's still some value there, he's not a guy nobody wants. He's a guy who just didn't fit what Harbaugh is building right now in New York. Now, why does this return actually matter? Because look, Daniel Faalele was not a guaranteed roster spot, not even close. He struggled in the preseason opener against the Vikings, and I mean he struggled badly. There was that play where he got beat almost instantly off the line, and it led to Jaxson Dart getting sacked and eventually heading to the medical tent. That's not a good look, especially when you're fighting for a job. So, when you take a guy who's on the roster bubble, somebody who might not have even made the final 53, and you turn him into a 2027 draft pick, that's good business. That's not just cleaning up a roster spot, that's actually adding value out of nothing. If the Giants had just released him outright, they get nothing back. But instead, they found a trade partner and got a pick out of a guy who probably wasn't cracking the roster anyway. That's exactly why Giants fans should be happy about this, even if it feels sudden. I know some of you are thinking, it's just a 6th-round pick, nothing to get excited about. But when you're building a roster the right way, this is exactly how you do it. You stack these little wins up, and eventually they turn into real contributors down the line. This front office already flipped a tight end into what turned into an offensive lineman earlier this year. So, this isn't the first time we've seen them turn one asset into another. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the part I want you guys to sit with for a second. John Harbaugh knows Daniel Faalele extremely well. This isn't some random Giants lineman he just picked up off waivers. Faalele started every single game at guard for Harbaugh's Baltimore Ravens for the last 2 seasons, protecting Lamar Jackson, and Harbaugh kept trusting him out there even when the criticism kept piling up. So when Harbaugh brought him to New York this offseason, a lot of us figured he'd have a real role here, at least solid depth, somebody Harbaugh clearly values, but instead, Faalele never became a real starter in New York. He didn't even get through one official regular season snap with the Giants before he was shipped out. That's wild when you think about the history there. Honestly, if this was any other head coach, I'd probably chalk it up to normal preseason roster stuff. But because it's Harbaugh, and because of how much he leaned on Faalele in Baltimore, this one hits different. That's not a small thing. So, what does that actually tell us about Harbaugh's thinking? If Harbaugh truly viewed Faalele as valuable offensive line depth, worth keeping around just in case injuries hit, he could have kept him. He had every reason to, given the relationship. But instead, Harbaugh accepted a late-round pick and moved on without much hesitation. To me, that says Harbaugh already has a clear picture of exactly which lineman he trusts going into the regular season. He's not sentimental about it. If the tape says a guy isn't good enough right now, Harbaugh is willing to make the call, even with somebody he's coached for years. And honestly, that should be encouraging for Giants fans, even if it feels a little cold-blooded. Harbaugh brought in a handful of familiar faces from Baltimore this offseason, guys like Isaiah Likely and Jordan Stout, and he clearly believes in bringing over people he trusts. But this move shows us that trust only goes so far. At the end of the day, this is still a business, and Harbaugh just proved he treats it that way. Now let's shift over to the offensive line picture as a whole, because honestly, this trade clears up a lot. The starting group is basically locked in at this point. Andrew Thomas is holding down left tackle, Jon Runyan Jr. is the left guard, John Michael Schmitz is at center, rookie Francis Mauigoa is starting at right guard after being that top 10 pick, and Jermaine Eluemunor is set at right tackle after re-signing this offseason. That's your 5 up front, and on paper, that group looks solid. Thomas has been healthy through camp, Eluemunor is coming off a strong stretch, and Mauigoa, even as a rookie sliding inside from tackle, has shown real flashes early on. If this group stays healthy, Jaxson Dart could end up with the cleanest pocket of his young career. But the real story right now is the backup competition, because that's where things are still wide open. You've got guys like J.C. Davis, Marcus Mbow, Aaron Stinnie, Lucas Patrick, Bryan Hudson, and Joshua Ezeudu, all fighting for spots behind that starting five. And with Faalele gone, there's more clarity here, and honestly, more opportunity too. One less body competing for reps means the picture gets a little cleaner for everybody else trying to make this roster. And look, this is a genuinely deep offensive line room, probably one of the deepest this franchise has had in years. Davis has flashed a tackle since being drafted, Stinnie already has starting experience at guard, and Patrick is a steady veteran who can play multiple spots. So even with Faalele gone, this room isn't hurting for bodies. So who actually benefits the most from this? Because I think this is one of the biggest storylines coming out of this trade. Marcus Embo has looked really impressive this preseason, like genuinely impressive. He's been playing both tackle spots and holding his own in pass protection, and a lot of people think he's already locked into that swing tackle role. But the name I really want to focus on here is Bryan Hudson. Now, Hudson spent most of last season on the practice squad, only getting a real look late in the year on the 53-man roster. But from what's being said about his preseason performance, he's actually turned some heads. He's playing well enough that people are starting to wonder if he could push Lucas Patrick for that backup center spot. And with Faalele now out of the picture, Hudson's path just got a little bit clearer. Sometimes in the NFL, it's not just about what you do on the field, it's about who's standing in front of you on the depth chart. And right now, with Faalele gone, there's one less guy in front of Hudson. Think about Hudson's journey, too. This is a guy who spent almost the entire season grinding it out on the practice squad last year, only getting called up late for a couple of games. That's the kind of story that makes you want to root for a guy. If Hudson keeps performing the way he has been, this trade might end up being the difference between him making the 53 or getting squeezed out. Now, quickly, let's talk about Jacksonville's side of this, because it explains why they were willing to give up a pick for a guy who was struggling in preseason. The Jaguars have been dealing with real offensive line injuries, especially with starting guard Patrick Mekari going down after back surgery. Jacksonville needed bodies, and Faalele gives them size and experience at a position of need, with the regular season only a couple weeks away. But this video is about the Giants, so I don't want to spend too much time over there. Let's bring it back to New York, because this trade has immediate consequences with the Dolphins joint practice coming up. This is a huge evaluation opportunity for every lineman still fighting for a spot. Joint practices against another team's defense usually tell you a lot more than another rep against your own guys in camp. So for guys like Hudson, Stinnie, Davis, and Ezeudu, this is basically an audition. Every snap matters right now. Every rep against Miami's front is another chance to show Harbaugh exactly why they deserve one of those final roster spots. And that's what makes the timing so interesting. Harbaugh didn't wait until after joint practices to make this call. He made it before, which tells me he already had enough tape on Faalele to know where he stood. Now the rest of these backups get a clean look, without Faalele soaking up reps that could go to somebody else. So here's the bigger picture, guys. This trade tells us that Harbaugh is willing to move quickly the moment a player isn't fitting his plan, no matter the history between them. The Giants gained real draft capital for a guy who might not have even made the roster, and at the same time, they cleared up another position battle heading into final cuts. And honestly, I don't think Faalele is going to be the last name that changes before this roster gets down to 53. There's still real competition at multiple spots, and Harbaugh has already shown us he's not afraid to make a move if it's the right business decision. So keep an eye on this offensive line group heading into the Dolphins' joint practice, because I think we're going to learn a lot more about who Harbaugh actually trusts up front. That's it for this one, guys. Let me know what you think about this trade down in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next video.